Hi, I'm Helen Durkin. I'm the Executive Vice President for Public Policy with IHRSA. Thanks for the invitation to speak to you today about the trends that we're seeing around the world. I've had the opportunity to work in this area in the industry for the last 30 years, so it's great to be able to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me. So one of the big issues for clubs these days, and I think probably one of their number one concerns that I hear about, is what to do when a transgender member employee joins the club. I guess the first part to know is that there is legal trends that are increasingly passing laws that say you cannot discriminate on the basis of someone's gender identity. So what that means if you're operating in a state, province, country that has that in effect is that you need to allow a person that comes into your club to use the locker room that they identify with. Now, the hard part for this issue for clubs is that it puts you really in a referee between two important rights: the human right with people with transgender and also the real legitimate privacy rights. We've talked to a lot of transgender people about this issue, and for the most part, they just want to work in your club. They just want to work out. They aren't trying to make a scene. I know that there are examples of people trying to make an issue of it for the clubs, and they're just trying to create an opportunity to sue you. That's the club's fear. We haven't seen that materialize as much as we feared. So let's talk about a few things you can do. First, there's sort of almost no hard and fast rules. Number one is maybe try to think with empathy. How can you be, and the people who are talking to the people, how can you be as empathetic as possible with the people that are transgender? And how can you listen to the concerns of the people for privacy? Think this you put on your very best customer service hat when you're dealing with both of these groups and really listen and try to solve problems for them. I think the second part of it is you also want to think about your the facility. So family locker room, you can't tell a transgender person to use a family locker room, to use that private changing space, but I certainly would point it out if I was giving a tour. If you don't have one and you're renovating, I'd make sure that you have privacy in those private locker rooms. If you're building a new club, make sure you put them in. If you're looking at your locker room, make sure that you have places for people to be able to change and shower without having to show their nudity. So I think that, I guess the bottom line for the transgender issue is this issue that's with us. You are asking to be a referee, and it's a tough place to be in. We try to put what we can on the IHRSA.org website to help you with this. But again, put your best customer service hat on and try to think from an empathetic view. Let's just make our clubs more accessible for everybody. I think accessibility in general is a bigger issue. You have the United Nations sustainability guidelines that talk about as a universal goal to have universal access to fitness. IHRSA is working with the WHO as part of its initiative to increase the number of people exercise, and a key component of what they're aiming for is that universal accessibility. So area one is, I think the need is greater than ever and the opportunity is greater than ever. That's why one of the things that I know Fitness Industry Canada is working with, that we're working with as well, is UFIT. One of the things we're doing in general through UFIT in accessibility is how do we make everybody feel welcome? And the best way to do that, aside from the law, is to work with people that have those disabilities and let them tell you some things that you may inadvertently putting up barriers. But there is legal issues that are going on. I know in Canada that you have disability laws in different places, and I believe there's talk of a bigger disability act, but now it's piecemeal. There is a trend around the world to, both from standards and from laws, that say there has to be a minimum spacing requirement between equipment. The other part about the disabilities is that especially in the United States, so I'm a little bit more familiar with the details of those, they have architectural guidelines. So if you're building a new club, your architect, your contractor should be aware of what they are and make sure you're in compliance. I think the biggest challenge that club owners face, as we talk about all the time at IHRSA, is how do we get the other 80% into our clubs? And I think one of the opportunities is to make sure that your locker room and your club is really accessible to them. Oh, you guys in Canada know more about music licensing issues than, unfortunately, most of the world. You and the Australians probably got a bum deal on this in terms of how much you've had to fight and how much you've had to pay. So in terms of traditional music copyright, I think you probably know it all. And I know you've done great work there. And certainly Fitness Industry Canada has been a leader in making sure that you guys have fair prices charged for the music. There's one trend that I do not know what the ramification is for Canada, but we were a little surprised. Recently, Peloton was sued by by a consortium of music producers. And we started hearing about a new type of copyright requirement that we didn't know about. It's called a sync. And what that says, and what's in issue in the case, is that if you use music to video, it creates a sync right. Sync rights are not that easy to get. Everything is too early to tell, but if you're trying to do streaming and video, we're concerned that the sync right might get in the way. I think I want to put a caution flag out there for everybody. We're looking at the case very carefully to determine if it is a big issue. So hopefully it's not. But again, it's a yellow flag. A yellow flag is on the field, and we're watching it. I can't talk to anyone without talking about the tsunami. But I think there's a lot of societal issues that are coming together and hitting the clubs. We talked about the transgender issue. That's a societal issue that's playing out in the club. There's a real move really strongly in the US, but with chances of it happening outside the US. Clubs have been said that their website isn't accessible for people with hearing impaired or visually impaired. Clubs are getting sued, businesses are getting sued. In a single day, last year a law firm reported that 15 cases were filed against it. You've probably heard of the GDPR in Europe. In California, there's already a version of the GDPR. So the idea of that privacy regulations will be coming to a regulatory body near you, you have to assume. People are concerned about their privacy. Clubs have a lot of data that they have, so that's a trend. I think the biometrics, there's a great opportunity of things that the club industry can do with biometrics, and we're seeing a tsunami of laws coming at in the US and around the world. This is all a long way of saying all these issues that club owners really didn't need to pay attention to. It was easy to say, I don't care what's happening in the Capitol. Those laws don't really affect me. Oh, I don't care what's happening in the courts. I never get sued. Those days are over. They're really over in the United States, but we're seeing that they're over in the whole world. So I'm not going to end on doom and gloom and the tsunami of all the terrible things that are coming at you. I think there's one really important trend that is worth highlighting, and you guys are already ahead of the game in terms of highlighting that, which is working with the government to help to promote physical activity. I was speaking before on a panel in Canada, and Dave Hardy asked me a question about being at the table, and I said, if you're not at the table, you're a sitting duck. One of the former board members of Versa, he liked to say that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I mentioned that Versa is working with WHO to develop a program, working with clubs because they think clubs are really important to get more people physically active. So I think the great thing about the clubs is that more and more governments, people, insurance, everybody is recognizing what a vital role that clubs play in getting the population more physically active. One trend is all opportunity that maybe we really can work together with the government, with your communities to get that 80% of the population that have been traditionally inactive and get them in your clubs. Have a great conference.